Hello everybody, my name is Dan and this is my series Practicing English. And today I spent a lot of time to play video games that will riff of riot games. It takes me a lot of time and wasted. This is wasted time. I need to focus on my thesis. Now I'm so embarrassed for myself and uncomfortable about that. And continue reading books. Today I decided to read the books called Ethen Frome. I don't know how can I pronounce exactly this word, but I try my best to say this word. Ethen Frome. Ethen Frome. Is it a name or is it something? Let's go with me. In the early years of 20th century, life on a farm in Massachusetts is not easy. The New England winters are hard. Snow and ice cover the fields for months, and the nights are long and cold. For a poor farmer like Ethen Frome, life has few bright moments. Ethen is slow, quiet man, but he feels things strongly. He feels the beauty of the world around him, stars shining in a moonless sky, the blue shadows of trees on sunlit snow. He feels the sad loneliness in his life. Locked in a loveless marriage to Zena, a cold, silent woman, whose only interest in her own ill health. Then Jenna's cousin, Matty Silver, comes to live in farmhouse, and as the months pass, Ethan feels a new happiness stealing into his life. He loves to watch Martine's face across the dinner table, to see her sweet smile and hear her soft voice, to walk round in her across in the snowfields. His wife Jenna says very little, but her cold, watchful eyes see everything. Okay. Oh, this is the name of the farmer. Okay. Ethen Frome. Let's go and figure out what happened in this story. Yes. This story have 8 chapters and a glossary with 3 activities. Okay, let's go. Beginnings. If you know Starfield, Massachusetts, do you know the post office there? If you know the post office, you have probably seen Ethen Frome driving up to it in his buggy, and you have probably wondered who he was. It was that several years ago I saw him for the first time. He was a noticeable figure. His tall, strong body was badly twisted and much shorter on the right side and on the left. He moved slowly and painfully, pulling himself along. Just a few steps from his buggies to the post office were clearly difficult for him. His face had sad, grim look. It was the face and the body of an old man, and I was surprised to hear he was only 52. I learned this from Harmon Gow, a man who knew all the families around Starfield. He's been like that since his bad accident nearly 24 years ago, said Harmon. But farms don't die young. Ethan lived to 100 probably. He looked like a dead man already, I said. I guess he's been in Starfield too many winter, said Harmon. Most smart people get out here. Why didn't he get out? I asked. He had to stay and take care of his family. First, his father got hurt. Then his mother fell sick, then his wife. And then the accident. Harmon gave a little smile. That's right. He had to stay there. Ethen Frome used to drive in his family every day and about midnight because I picked up my mail at about the same time. I often saw him. He came to the post office only for newspaper and sometimes for a packet for a medicine company for Ms. Xenophon. Starfield people understood that he didn't want to stop and talk, and on most days Frome climbed slowly back into his buggy and drove away without a word to anyone. At the time, my company had sent me on an engineering job near Starfield, and I was staying at the home of a lady called Miss Ruth Hale. Before she was married, her name had been Ruth Varnum, but her husband Ned Hale was now dead, and she had returned to live with her mother in the Varnum home. It was a grand house, large and wide, with tall dark trees outside. Although it was clear that the Varnums no longer had much money, theirs was still the finest house in the village. Ruth Hale enjoyed talking about her neighbors, and I hoped that she could tell me more about Ethen Frome. But when I asked her, she just looked unhappy and said in a loud voice, "Yes, I knew them both. It was awful. I asked for other people, and everybody in Starfield agreed that Ethen Frome had had more troubles in his life than most people. But nobody explained why he had that sad, grim look on his face. In the end, I learned the story, piece by piece, from several people. And often happens, the story was a different time, but I slowly began to put it together. And my interest in Ethen Frome grew stronger when, a little later, I met man himself. It happened like this. Every day I had to travel about 3 miles to the station where I got my train to work. I usually hire a horse from Dennis Aldi, the rich village shopkeeper. But in the midnight of winter, his and most of the other Starfield houses caught an illness. For a day or two, I could not find a horse to hire anywhere. But until Harmon Go had an idea. "Why don't you ask Ethen Frome to drive you?" he said. "His horse aren't sit, and we need a door too. That from farm and sawmill don't make enough money to keep cat alive." So Ethen Frome agreed to drive me, and every day for a week I sat beside him in his sledge, and his thin horse pulled us over the hard snow to the station. Then the icy evenings, he brought me back to Starfield. He was not unfriendly, but during the hours drive, he never turned to look at me and spoke very little. Once I said something about Florida, and he told me that he had been there. Another time, he showed interest in a silence book of mine, which I had left in his sledge by mistake in the morning. But most of the time, Frome drove without a word, and I began to feel he was like a land around him. Feel began that he was like a land around him. This silent man and the snow-covered fields had the same kind of cold loneliness. Anything warm and alive inside him was locked away. under the deep icy cold of too many star-filled winters. After about a week, we were driving back one night in terrible weather. Heavy snow was falling, hiding everything in a soft white cloud, in a soft white cloud, and the air had an icy coldness. The, the old horses was getting tired, and I got out to walk beside him, but I found it hard to keep moving. After a time, Frome looked into darkness and said, "That's my place down there. We have, we had half, we had enough of this." I understood that he was offering me a bed for the night, and I turned down towards the poor, lonely-looking farmhouse. And after I helped him put away the sledge and take care of the horse, we fought our way through the snow to the front of the house. I followed him inside, and from behind a door on our right, I heard a woman's voice, thin, high, whining voice. Frome opened the door of the room. "Come in," he said to me. And as he spoke, the whining voice fell silent. That was the night I began to understand Ethen Frome and put together his story. Okay. Little trouble when he went to work. He got home, but with a terrible terrible weather. He can't go home, so he have to stay at Frome house. Okay. Chapter 2. Coming home from the dance. It was cold, clear night, and the village lay under deep snow. Bright, icy stars shone from the dark sky down on the silent whiteness below. Young Ethen Frome walked quickly down the empty, moonlit street. He passed LD's fine new shop and the Farnham's house with its two tall black trees. Below that was the slough of the Corbury Road. On the clear nights it was open, full of young people coasting down, laughing and shooting as they went. But there was not a sound from the icy slough as Ethan passed by. Tonight, all starfilled life was the room in the church. The windows sent yellow light across the snow, and the soft dance music flowed out into the still midnight air. Ethan hid the shadows outside the church and looked in through the nearest window. The room was hot, bright, and filled with young men and girls. The music had finished, and the people were getting ready to leave. Suddenly, a lively young man with thick black hair jumped into the middle of the floor. He went into the crowd and pulled out a young girl. She was dark-haired and had a bright red scarf around her head. The music started again, and soon the floor was alive with dancing figures. Outside the cold, Ethan's heart was beating fast. His eyes followed the girl's red scarf and cloud of brown hair, as he danced in faster and faster circles. The young man was Dennis Eldey, the son of Starfield's most successful shopkeepers. Dennis, old successful with a young woman of the village, was well known. Ethan watched jealously as Mattie, the dark-haired girl, held out his hands and smiled at him with her dark, shining eyes. How can she look at him like that? Ethan wondered unhappily. Doesn't she realize that she is like? Ethan used to walk into Starfield to fetch home his wife's coaching. Marie Silver, Marty Silver. On the field evenings, when some chance of amusement brought her to the village, Martin had been with the Fromes for years now. She lived with them in their lonely farmhouse and had Ethan's wife, Jenna. With the housework, Ethan had liked the warm, smiling girl from the moment that she arrived. She brought hope and life and brightness into his home, like someone lighting a fire in the cold room. She had more than brightness. Ethan felt that she loved the beauty of the natural world around them. Here at his side, living under his roof and eating his bread, was someone who felt the same wonder as he did. He could tell of things and show her things. The bright stars in the clear night sky, birds flying over golden fields, blue shadows of trees on sunlit snow, and he knew that these things gave Martin and him the same feelings of deep, silent happiness. But but now those feelings seemed so far away. He watched Martin's laughing face, and she flew around and around the room, and he felt lonely and unhappy. Then he remembered a fear that he had tried to forget. His eyes were cold, silent women who noticed everything but said very little. Her only real interests were her own ill health. But recently she had started to complain more and more about Matisse Howard and to say things which worry Ethan. I need someone to have me when Martin leaves, she had said suddenly one morning. Oh, Matisse never leaves us while you need her, he replied. His way lie in bed and watched as he got dressed. If a poor girl like her has a chance to marry a smart boy like Dennis Early, aren't going to stop her, she said in her flat, winning voice. The doctor say I can manage on my own, so we'll need to hire a girl. Live with a Matisse. Ethan could not think of it. Her voice, her sweet mind, her gentle arm in his arm during those night walks back to the farm. These were only things which mattered in his world. He had been stupid to think Zena would not notice his interest in Matisse. He had not thought about it before, but now he stood in the darkness outside the church and remembered all the things that Zena had said, and his fear grew. The dancers, now in their thick coats and scarves, came out into the cold night air. Ethan heard Martin's voice in the crowd. He stepped back into the shadows, suddenly afraid to speak to her. The crowd quickly disappeared, and Martin stood alone outside the church, looking around her. Then a man's figure appeared. Nobody to walk you home, Matt? What a pity! But aren't I lucky that I got my dad's horse and sleigh down here waiting for us? Come on, let's take a ride. The girl said nothing but stood still, watching, while Dennis Eddy went to untie the horse. In the shadows, Ethan too watched and waited, with his heart beating fast. Mattie held his life in her hands. Elsie got into the sled and called Mattie to join him. Then she turned and ran up the slope. "Goodbye. Have a lovely ride," she called back. Eddie laughed and followed her up to the slope in his sledge. After the moment, he jumped down and tried to put his arm through hers. She stepped quickly out of the way, and Ethan's suddenly fear turned to happiness. A moment later, he heard the sound of Eddie's sled going away, and saw Mattie walk along across the snow. He caught up with her by the Vernon trees. She turned round, surprised. "Oh," she said, "I thought maybe you couldn't come." "If you thought I couldn't come, what did you ride back with Dennis Eddie?" he answered. "Oh, how did you know?" she cried. Where were you? I never saw you." They stood in the dark shadows of the tree, and their laughing voices ran together like water dancing down from the mountain in springtime. He put his arm through hers, but neither of them moved. Ethan wished he could stand there with her all night, the blacknecks. Mattie took a few steps forward and then stopped, looking down the icy slope of the Corbury road. "There was a lot of people coasting this evening," she said. "Ned Hale and Ruth Vernon almost crashed into the big tree down here. It's so dangerous, that tree." "You'll be safe with me, Matt," replied Ethan. "Would you like to come coasting some night? We could come tomorrow, if there's a moon." "Oh, yeah, how lovely, how lovely." They walked along in silence, but then all Ethan's jealous fears returned. Ethan's jealous fears returned. Okay? "I guess it's natural that you're going to leave us," he said at last. "Leave? You mean Gina's unhappy with me? I know I aren't so strong or so smart, but when I try, I really do." "So you don't want to leave us, Matt?" "Where could I go?" she whispered, almost crying. Her answer made Ethan sad and happy at the same time. They continued their walk, with the dark, starry sky above them and the quiet loneliness fields all around. The entrance to Ethan's farmland, they passed to the Frome graves. Ethan had always felt that the gravestones were looking at him and saying, "We never got out of Starfield. Why should you?" But now he didn't want to escape. All he wanted to be with Mattie, and someday to lie under that cold row with Mattie beside him. Ethan was happy now. In his world of dreams, for the first time he put his arm around Mattie. She let it stay there, and they walked up to the farmhouse. The house was dark and quiet. Zena always went to bed early. On the nights when they came back later, she used to lock up the house and hide the key outside the kitchen door. Ethan felt for the key under the unusual stone. "Matt, the key is not there," he said. This had never happened before. They began to look for it in the darkness. Suddenly there was a sound inside the house. They heard a step on the stairs and saw a light under the door. Then the door opened, and Ethan saw his wife. She stood in the dark doorway, a tall, thin woman with a blanket around her shoulders. She held a lamp in one hand. and its light threw strange shadows on her thin, light face. She said nothing, and they stepped into the kitchen. It was deadly cold, like a grave. Ethan shook the snow off his boots. "I guess you forgot us," he said. "Look at Zena." "No, I just felt too bad. I couldn't sleep." "I'm sorry," said Matty. "Can I do anything to help Zena?" "No, there's nothing you can do." Zena turned away from her. "And why couldn't you shake the snow off her side?" she said to her husband. They left the kitchen, and the two women went towards the stairs. "If I go up now, Matty'll see me into the bedroom with Zena," thought Ethan, "and I don't want that, not tonight. I think I stayed down here a bit longer. I've got some paperwork to do," he said. "What now?" said Zena. "You die of cold." Ethan did not answer, but turned back towards the kitchen. Then he saw the look in Martine's eye. Was it a look of warning? "I guess you're right. It's awful cold down here," he agreed. With his head void, he slowly followed his wife to their bedroom. Chapter 3. A visit to the doctor. The next morning was cold and bright. Ethan was down at his sawmill early because he had to take some wood to the village builder that day. The winter sun burned red in a clear sky, and the sunlight danced over the bright, snowy fields, leaving deep blue shadows under trees. Ethan's thoughts were always clearest when he was walking in the quiet morning air. Last night, after the bedroom door had closed behind them, Zena had taken her medicines and gone to bed without a word. Ethan lay next to her, watching the light from under Matty's door and thinking, why had he not kissed her on the walk home? He remembered her soft lips in the moonlight now. In the clear morning sunshine, he could still see her face. He could not see it in the red sky and in the bright shining snow. Matty was the daughter of Orange Silver, a cousin of Zena Frome's. Silver's medicine company had seemed successful, and he had lived like a rich man. But when he died, his wife and daughter had a terrible surprise. They discovered that he had borrowed $1,000 which he could not pay back. This awful news killed Miss Silver immediately. He had almost lost money which belonged to his brothers and sister, so there was nobody in the family who wanted to help poor Matty. The 20-year-old girl was alone in the world, with the money and with her friends. She was not strong, and she had never studied or learned to do a job. So Matty came to Staffield to work with a bay in her house in Zena's home. At first, Zena often complained about the girl's work. Then, as the months went by, Matty grew stronger and found the work easier. Zena had more time to think about her illness. Life under the Frome's roof became more peaceful. But now, Zena's strange silent looks, the warning in Matty's eye last night, Ethan was sure that something was wrong. By midnight, the wood was all loaded, ready to take Andrew Hale, the builder. But Ethan decided to go to go home. If there was going to be trouble, he wanted to be there. So Ethan and Jonathan Powell, his hireman, walked through fields back to the house. When they entered the kitchen, Matties was making coffee. Jenna was sitting at the table, wearing her best brown dress and tall hat. A suitcase stood beside her. "Where are you going, Jenna?" asked Ethan, surprised. My pants are getting really bad. I'm going over to my aunt's in Bestbridge for the night, and tomorrow I'll see that new daughter," she answered. "If you're too busy, I suppose you can let Jonathan Powell drive me to the station." Ethan said nothing. He was lost in his old thoughts. He realized that for the first time, he and Mattie would be alone for the night. He looked at Mattie. Was she thinking the same thing? He looked at his wife's thin, bloodless face. Zeno was 35, only 7 years older than he was, but she was already an old woman. "Of course, John Holmes, I'll take you," he said at last. "I can't do it myself because I've got to get the money from the wood from Unreal Hell." This was a lie. Unreal Hell never paid immediately, but Ethan really had no wish to make the long, slow journey to the station with his miserable wife at his side. Zena made no reply, and soon afterwards she left with Jotham. Ethan picked up his coat, stood for a moment in the doorway. "See you later, Matt," he said. "It's warm and bright in the kitchen. The sun shining on the following pot plants by the window. The cat sleeping in the chair." Mattie looked from her housework. "See you later, Ethan," she said happily. On the way down to the village, Ethan thought of his return to Mattie that night. With her Zena, it had seemed more like home. As he drove through snowy fields, this usually silent man began to sing. Well, Ethen Frome had not always been so quiet and lonely. As a student, he had liked being among happy, friendly, and young people. He had enjoyed his science studies and wanted to become an engineer. But after his father's accident and death, Ethan had to leave his studies and return home. Life was hard for him, walking along on the poor farm and unsuccessful sawmill. Then his mother fell ill and became more and more silent. Sometimes she used to say a few crazy words, but for most of the time she refused to speak at all. So, which is long, cold, stuffy winter, the silence and loneliness around Ethan grew deeper. As his mother came towards her last illness, Ethan's cousin Zena arrived to take care of her. It was wonderful to hear another person's voice in the house again, and Zena was an excellent nurse and housekeeper. Old Miss Frome finally died one dark winter's day, and the idea of being alone again filled Ethan with fear. He was grateful to Zena for all that she had done, and she asked her to stay and marry him. Then he had a first plan to sell the farm and move to the town, but it was hard to find a buyer, and Ethan soon realized that his wife could not live in a place where she was not some important. Realized that his wife could not live in a place where she was not someone important. In less than a year, her sickliness appeared. Then she too fell silent. Her strained, wordless look worried Ethan. Was she going a little crazy, like his mother? What thoughts and plans were hidden behind her cold eyes? But the afternoon, as Ethan drove to village with his slate full of wood for the builders, he felt less afraid. Zina had gone away to Bestbridge with all her thoughts to her own health, and tonight he had an evening alone with Mattie. But there was still one worry, the lie about the money from Andrew Hale. He knew that Zina would want to know where it was. When Ethan arrived at the builders, Hale invited him into his office to sit down and get warm. He was a large, red-faced, likable man, an old friend of Ethan's family. Ethan did not know how to begin, but at last he managed to ask help for the first $50 towards this winter's wood. The builders were surprised. He always paid at the end of 3 months, never before. He refused in his warm, friendly way, then asked, "Look, you aren't got money problems, have you?" "No, not at all," replied Ethan, very embarrassed. The afternoon had turned into cold red evening by the time Ethan left the builders. He heard a sound of sledge bells, and Dennis Eldie drove past, shouting, "Hello, Eth." Eldie was going towards the Frome farm. Did he know that Zina had gone? Was he going there to spend more time alone with Mattie? Ethan felt wildly jealous. Then, the moment later, was ashamed of his feelings. By Varnum House, Ethan saw two figures standing together under the trees. He had a kiss and surprise. Oh, as he passed by, two happy lovers kissed where he had stood with Mattie the night before. But unlike him, Ruth and Varnum and Nethel didn't need to hide their feelings. Now, how lucky they were. As night fell, Ethan passed by the Frome gravestones and drove off to the farmhouse. A light shone in a room upstairs. She getting herself ready for supper, he thought. Okay, I think this is for the end for today. Maybe that's a story about love story. Okay, let's see. Let's figure it out after 2 or 3 days. Oh, and now I need to stop. Thank you for listening. Until next time. Bye.